Today's heart-wrenching story is experienced by a 13-year-old boy named Diego, who lived in the United States. But the case I will tell you today is not simply a story about children or about school life. It is a real case about how the ordinary lives of children were completely and horrifyingly destroyed. It was a very sensitive case to handle. I hope today's story will become an opportunity for you to reflect once again on these kinds of issues. So now, let us follow the stories of Diego. On September 16, 2019, during lunchtime at Landmark Middle School in California, Diego Stolz, a 13-year-old 8th grader at this school, was standing in front of classmates who had been bullying him for a long time. Diego stood with his hands neatly clasped in front of him, his face tense and filled with fear. At that moment, one of the classmates said a few words and suddenly punched Diego in the face. Diego staggered backward, and then another classmate standing nearby struck the opposite side of his face. Losing his balance, Diego collapsed to the ground and slammed his head hard against a concrete pillar. From the impact, Diego fell completely backward and hit his head on the concrete ground. Just hearing it is horrifying. But this was only one of the many things Diego experienced. So let us take a look at what eventually happened to Diego, what happened to the boys who bullied him, and what unfolded along the way. My name is Brian, and I will be narrating today's story for Bitter Clues. Let's dive right in. Diego was born into a South American immigrant family in the United States. He lost his mother when he was only 1 year old. His father was often away from home because of work. In reality, his father did not have the capacity to care for a 1-year-old Diego, along with his other young son by himself. After much family discussion, they decided to move in with Diego's aunt and live together. However, misfortune continued. 6 years later, Diego's father also passed away. After that, Diego's aunt and uncle became his legal guardians and raised Diego along with their own children. Including Diego and his cousins, they raised a total of 6 children, caring for all of them as if they were their own. Like other boys his age, Diego was an ordinary boy who enjoyed video games, soccer, music, and hiking. In 2018, Diego enrolled at Landmark Middle School, located in the Moreno Valley area, about 110 kilometers east of Los Angeles. This school had approximately 800 students enrolled from 6th grade through 8th grade. Due to the area's demographics, where many Hispanic and Black families lived, 66% of the students were Hispanic and 18% were African Americans. At first, Diego adjusted well to school life and made many friends. But because of his kind and timid personality, several classmates began bullying him, starting in 7th grade. One day, someone stole Diego's sneakers, forcing him to walk home barefoot. Later, his clothes also began disappearing. At first, it seemed like rough teasing between boys, but the teasing escalated into mockery, isolation, and physical violence. They hit his chest, cursed at him, and threatened him. The bullying grew more severe over time. When Diego's aunt learned about what was happening, she repeatedly went to the school to report that Diego was being bullied. However, school officials only responded by saying they understood, without taking the situation seriously. The only action taken against the perpetrators was distributing anti-bullying prevention pamphlets at school. Sometime later, 7th grade ended and summer vacation began, and the situation seemed to quiet down for a while, as if it had been forgotten. In early September of 2019, the new school year began, and Diego became an 8th grader. As soon as the semester started, the bullying and harassment resumed. At the same time, this time, violence was involved, and the severity was much worse. Only a few days after the new semester began, on Thursday, September 12th, Diego was assaulted once again by the same students. Diego went to his science teacher, told the truth, and asked for help. Fortunately, the science teacher saw Diego's expression and took the matter very seriously. The science teacher immediately reported the incident to the assistant principal responsible for administration, Camilla O'Connor. While making the report, the science teacher explained that since the location and time of the assault were known, the truth could be confirmed immediately by checking the school's closed-circuit television footage. However, although Assistant Principal Camilla responded by saying she understood and would check the footage, she ultimately did not review the video or take any other action. That day, when Diego returned home, he told his aunt everything. He explained that he had been assaulted by classmates at school and that the students had even threatened to beat him again next time. Diego's aunt, who was recovering at home after recently undergoing surgery, was unable to go to the school herself. Instead, she asked her adult daughter Jasmine to go to the school with Diego the next day and make sure the issue was addressed properly. The next day, Friday, September 13th, Diego's cousin Jasmine took Diego and went to see Assistant Principal Camilla. During a meeting that lasted about 20 minutes, the cousin explained that she knew which students had been bullying and beating Diego. She stated that the harassment was extremely severe and that the students had even threatened Diego by saying they would beat him even more and that he should expect it. She pleaded that in his current state, Diego was too frightened to attend school at all, and she firmly demanded that the school take active measures. In response, Assistant Principal Camilla said the following. She said that she had already planned to meet with Diego and talk to him. She stated that she knew who the perpetrators were, and that, as punishment for this assault, those students would be suspended for 3 days starting the following Monday. She also said that the schedules of the offending students would be changed so that they would no longer attend classes with Diego and would be separated from him. She then showed consideration by telling Diego that he must be having a very difficult time and suggested that he go home early that day with his cousin. When cousin Jasmine returned home, she told the family about the promises made by the assistant principal. The family believed that the school would now resolve the issue and firmly trusted that the other students would no longer bully Diego. However, contrary to her promises, even after hearing about the incident from the science teacher and after meeting with Jasmine and Diego, the assistant principal never reviewed the CCTV. She also did not impose any suspensions or separation measures on the offending students. After laying out such detailed and extensive solutions, she failed to follow through on even one of them. It seemed as though she thought it was just a common occurrence, or that it could be dealt with later. The assistant principal did not report this matter to the other administrative teacher in charge of students, or to the principal either. In the end, the assistant principal's promises were not kept. After the weekend passed, Diego returned to school on Monday. When he arrived at school, the offending students were also there, acting as if nothing had happened. They even held a grudge against Diego for reporting them to the school. During lunchtime, in front of the school entrance crowded with many students, they called out to the frightened Diego and began harassing him once again. Even though no action had been taken, one would expect that the assistant principal would at least keep a close watch that day. However, on that day, Assistant Principal Camilla was on vacation. She did not come to school at all. And it was on that very day that something absolutely horrific happened inside the school. Do you remember the assault scene I described at the very beginning, when I first told Diego's story? 2 students struck Diego, causing him to collapse to the ground and hit his head against a concrete pillar and the floor. That incident happened during lunchtime that day. After that, the 2 offending students fled the scene, leaving Diego lying on the ground. Foam began to form at Diego's mouth, and he suffered severe convulsions. The paramedics who arrived shortly afterward fitted Diego with an oxygen mask and transported him to the emergency room. However, Diego suffered severe brain damage and fell into a brain-dead state. He was barely breathing with the help of life support equipment. When Diego ultimately failed to regain consciousness, the medical staff recommended that the family discontinue life-sustaining treatment. Finally, 9 days after the incident, on the evening of September 24th, after much deliberation, the family accepted the decision, and Diego's organs were donated to other patients. There were multiple opportunities to prevent the worst possible outcome. Yet, due to the failures of the school, the situation ultimately led to this devastating result. From here, we need to look at how matters were handled afterward and how the case was brought to a close. Whether the offending students received proper punishment, whether the person known as the assistant principal was appropriately held accountable, and what actions Diego's aunt and uncle took. Let us now see what happened next. After Diego's death, the Moreno Valley Unified School District placed the school's principal, Scott Walker, and assistant principal Camilla O'Connor on administrative leave, and arranged for other teachers to temporarily take over their duties. Then, the police arrested the two offending students the day after the incident, on September 17th, on charges of assault resulting in death. However, because the students were minors, their identities were not disclosed, and they were released shortly after questioning. 2 years later, in November 2020, the offenders, now 15 years old, were formally charged in juvenile court with involuntary manslaughter and assault and went to trial. During the trial, prosecutors classified the students' actions as murder and demanded a strong sentence in the interest of public safety. Diego's aunt gave shocking testimony, stating that although the school had been aware of the ongoing bullying, it failed to intervene actively. She also testified that Diego had even been told to endure the situation quietly and not fight back against the offending students. On the other hand, the defense acknowledged some of the assault, but asked the court to take into consideration that the students had behaved well while detained, had no prior criminal records, and should be shown leniency. The defense also argued that such a tragedy should never have happened, but suggested that the fight may have occurred due to the school's lack of proper supervision and management, shifting some of the responsibility onto the school. In March 2021, the court delivered its verdict. What conclusion was reached? Both students were found guilty on all charges. Before sentencing, the presiding judge, Roger, stated that even if the offenders did not have the intent to kill Diego, they bore direct responsibility for his death. However, he added that the children were still young and lacked experience in empathy and understanding toward others, and that they would need to make an effort to live together as members of society in the future. He then expressed opposition to the severe punishment requested by the prosecution. Instead of prison sentences, the court issued suspended sentences with probation, requiring 150 hours of community service, anger management treatment, and participation in anti-bullying programs. In the end, after completing 47 days of detention during the trial process, the two students were released into the supervision and custody of their parents. Diego's family strongly criticized the suspended sentences, saying that Diego was dead while the offending students had received virtually no punishment. Diego's legal guardians, his aunt and uncle, then sought to file a separate civil lawsuit, holding the school accountable for failing to take any action, despite receiving repeated reports that Diego was being continuously bullied. However, according to the explanation provided by their attorney, only immediate family members were eligible to file such a lawsuit. Since both of Diego's parents had passed away, only Diego's two biological brothers were legally permitted to bring a lawsuit related to his case. This meant that Diego's aunt and uncle, who had raised him like their own child since he was a baby, did not even have the legal right to file a lawsuit on his behalf. When this became known, the California legislature began to take action. In September 2020, prompted by Diego's death, the legislature passed Assembly Bill number 2445. The bill allowed legal guardians to file civil lawsuits in cases where a child dies due to wrongful acts or negligence, even if both biological parents are deceased. As a result, the legal guardians, the aunt and uncle who had raised Diego up to that point, also became eligible to file a lawsuit. Ultimately, the aunt and uncle, along with Diego's two brothers, filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the Moreno Valley Unified School District, Assistant Principal Camilla O'Connor of Landmark Middle School, and the two offending students, seeking damages of $100 million. In the previous criminal trial, the court addressed whether the actions of the offending students constituted involuntary manslaughter and assault, and what the appropriate punishment should be. In this civil trial, the issue was whether the school had failed in its duty to respond appropriately and provide proper supervision, despite repeated reports of bullying. The plaintiffs argued that even though bullying, harassment, and violence among students were widespread, the school and its staff made little effort to respond actively or resolve the problem. They also pointed out that the school lacked proper procedures and response manuals to protect students. The criticism was that although Landmark Middle School had a duty to properly manage and supervise student safety, it consistently acted with irresponsibility and lack of oversight. On the other hand, the school district's attorneys argued that while there may have been failures by staff to follow certain procedures, responsibility for Diego's death lay with the two offending boys who assaulted him. After 3 years of litigation, on September 15, 2023, Diego's bereaved family and the education authorities finally reached a settlement. The judge ordered the school district to establish new response procedures for bullying and school violence, to train faculty and staff on those procedures, and to pay compensation of $27 million. After the settlement, Diego's family described the outcome of the trial as a very painful victory. They said that if the school had recognized the seriousness of Diego's bullying earlier and responded appropriately, his death could have been prevented. Although the family will carry the grief of losing Diego for the rest of their lives, they expressed hope that this case would serve as a lesson for other school districts and lead to meaningful change. As a result of this case, the principal of Landmark Middle School and 2 assistant principals who had been placed on administrative leave ultimately stepped down from their positions. The school district promised that it would implement bullying prevention and response measures to ensure that such a tragedy would never happen again. This lawsuit and the size of the settlement became the largest school violence-related settlement in United States history. That fact alone shows that education authorities in the United States no longer view bullying and school violence as merely personal conflicts between students. Instead, they are now making active efforts to establish systems and measures to address these issues more seriously. After the investigations conducted following Diego's death and the 2 trials that took place, this case was brought to a close in this way. I'm Brian. Thank you so much for watching, and until the next story, please stay safe.